Hey, good morning, everybody. It's about 8:27 on this Friday, TGIF Friday, if you will, January 27th, I believe. Yes, January 27th, 2012. And I'm here to, well, first of all, I want to apologize if I repeated myself many times in my opinions video. If I repeated the same thing over and over again, I guess you could kind of say I was trying to get a point across, and I'm pretty sure you guys understand that. In fact, Cloud Davis kind of confirmed that as well. I don't know exactly what Cloud Davis and a friend was theorizing, but maybe they can give more of an explanation down the line. But I'm here to talk about this. Game Boy Sage, right there, it says on top, Ian Flynn responds to a fan. In other words, this fan responds via email to a fan. And basically this fan, many of you may know this fan, is better known at DeviantArt or DeviantArt, whatever you want to call it, as Game Boy Sage. Now, Game Boy Sage, as probably a lot of you know, that visit DeviantArt or DeviantArt and have a membership there and are subscribed to Game Boy Sage, kind of understand how Sage has been feeling lately about Ian Flynn, especially with the more recent issues. Now, Sage has gone out and said, as of late, with 233 coming out, that was probably one of the better issues in a while, except perhaps the ending. And I think a lot of people didn't like that ending in the main story. The side story was good. I will admit that, because as I admitted, even though I only caught glimpses and pieces of the main story, I did read the side story courtesy of Sasuke19 here on YouTube. But I did not open my issue yet. So those are the only rare exceptions that I'm ever going to try to catch glimpses and pieces, if not read a side story or so. Now, the email that Ian Flynn sent to Game Boy Sage was sent to Game Boy Sage because a friend or fellow member or subscriber to Sage basically suggested to get in contact with Ian and see what Ian has to say. Now, none of us. Now, here's the thing: we all have to admit that none of us ever thought Ian Flynn was really a bad guy in person. I mean, he's only doing his job. He's only doing his job, and he's doing things to create interest. That's the only reason he's doing certain things. None of us have ever said he's really a bad guy. Yes, I have admitted I don't like the fact that he banned me from his message board, but reading this email, after reading this email, it makes me have a better understanding as to why. And as I mentioned, maybe perhaps the reason I was banned was because I was asking too many questions that might have spoiled too many things, or maybe I was guessing a little too much and almost figuring out certain plot lines and how things were going to go. And in my opinion, I guess maybe Ian felt that was going to clue everybody else in and spoil the book. So again, I understand completely why he did that. So I mean, because who's to say if I was in Ian's place, who's to say I wouldn't have done the same thing? If the roles were reversed. Now, getting on to this email, these email responses to Game Boy Sage by Ian Flynn. Game Boy Sage, I do have a little response to those emails that he printed in a description box. Actually, when he submitted this to DeviantArt. Basically, what Sage did was, I guess, take a picture or something like this of the emails and post it on the account, on the DeviantArt account, to share with everybody. So, Game Boy Sage, if you're listening, I hope you don't mind if I share this with everybody here at YouTube. But the first email to Game Boy Sage from Ian goes like this, and I quote, GB, that's what he calls Game Boy Sage, GB. First, let me apologize for jumping between email addresses. I'm currently abroad, and my laptop's copy of Outlook is being buggy. I appreciate your concerns for my reputation and employment. And okay. Basically, he says, I appreciate your concern for my reputation and employment. And I'm afraid I won't be able to aquatically answer most of your questions. In other words, I guess as much as he would like to answer the questions right there and then, he can't because, and again, quoting this email, for most of what you want to know, you will really need to keep reading. To answer anything would spoil the book, and I can't do that. And that's understandable. Continuing on. I do think you're reading too much into your other M connections. He calls it OM connections. Let's be frank. Other M was bad, way too dark, and not very Sonic-like. And while the current state of the plot may be a bit bleak at the moment, it's nowhere near Other M's level of grim dark. Other M was about terrorism, murder, and brutal warfare. The current plot line is about things going poorly for our heroes and how they cope with it. The Other M rebels cameos in the Silver Arc were just that, cameos. An in-joke for the 20 people who... An in-joke. This is what he calls the the rebels of the Other M references in Other M. Not Other M, but in the Silver Story Arc of Sonic Universe. He calls it, basically, that it was an in-joke for the 20 people who remembered Other M. As for killing characters left and right for shock value, I can't agree since nobody's died lately. Unless you're referring to the house cleaning at the beginning of my run, and that was almost 6 years ago. So basically what Ian Flynn is saying there at the start of this first email is that the shock value that we all are that some of us are accusing him of hasn't really occurred lately. I think some fans may or may not disagree on that. Now, continuing on, and I quote, as for what I'm thinking, again, I can't go into detail for fear of spoilers. Basically, he's saying that if he goes into detail, people will pretty much figure out what's going to happen. One factor is that with Sonic the Hedgehog 175 to 177, the biggest complaint ain't that there was no real loss for the heroes, that the heroes were untouchable. Another is that for over 200 issues, the dynamic of the team has largely gone unchanged. This is about doing something different to break the mold of Sonic and Friends win always eventually. So basically, right there in the second part of this first email, he's stating that the biggest complaint anybody ever got, the biggest complaint the comic ever got, was there was no real loss for the heroes. There was no real dreaded loss and aftermath and all that. And that for over 200 issues, the dynamic of the team, the Freedom Fighters, would never went unchanged. So basically, the reason he's doing all this right now is to break the mold. So let's say eventually down the line, Sally gets restored, and like I said in my opinions yesterday, let's say she gets restored and the blue that she has now becomes like a new uniform and all that. Basically, it will kind of showcase the fact that not even the Freedom Fighters are safe from any kind of circumstance. Like, let's say Bunny right now, she's de-roboticized. She's completely flesh and blood. No one's to say that later on down the line after 250, should the comic continue, which it will probably, who's to say she won't be the next one considered for robotization? We don't know that. So anyway, and remember what I said one time when I voiced the concern that in that video where I said that, in one of my videos where I said basically that Sonic might consider not taking Sally on any more missions, and if he does, making sure she doesn't go with him when he confronts Eggman or something. That might be part of what could be changing. Now he continues on. This is the third and final parts, the third and fourth, basically the third and final parts of the first email. He goes on, and I quote, "I know I'm rubbing a number of fans the wrong way with this one. That's the point." Okay. To be more accurate, he says in the third part of this first email to Game Boy Sage, he states, "I know I'm rubbing a number of fans the wrong way with this one. That's the point. It's supposed to be unsettling and upsetting. It's not going to be a slog. It's not going to be a slog through bad news straight 8 to 250. That's ludicrous." Well, basically he's saying it's not going to be a log. It's not going to be a slog. I guess that's what he said. Through bad news straight to 250. That's ludicrous. Basically what he's saying is that we're not going to get entirely bad news all the way to 250 because that would be out of the question. That would be stupid. But we've not hit rock bottom yet either. And once you've hit rock bottom, the only way is to go back up. I know that's cryptic, but it's all I could do for you right now. So in other words, what he's saying is that even though a lot of us have come out like Laser X5, Jonathan 83X, Mystic Core, Miko, even though some of us have come out, and even Game Boy Sage, even though some of us have come out, some of us like them have come out and said that they don't trust Ian Flynn going to 250, right now he's saying that it's not going to be, that we're not going to have a slew of bad news all the way to 250. Basically he's saying that would be out of the question. That's crazy. But the thing is, they have said, but here's the thing, and he says, and even though he says it's cryptic, he says, but we've not hit rock bottom yet, and once you've hit rock bottom, the only way is to go back up. The only way is to go up. And he says he knows that's cryptic, but that's all he can give them. So in other words, what he's saying is that the characters, each and every one of them, has to hit rock bottom. And I think even this might even include Sally, if let's say she just gets her free will restored. They all have to hit rock bottom before they can get back up. So in other words, what it sounds like to me is he's saying they got to hit rock bottom before they realize, you know what? The only way we're going to possibly beat Eggman is to get back up and just do what we always have done. Just try to beat him at every punch. And that's probably what they're going to have to do. Or probably will do. I don't know. Now, continuing on. In the final part of this first email that Ian responded back with to Game Boy Sage, in the final part of this first email, he says, and I quote, "Finally, keep in mind all stories are approved by my editor. He knows full well what my plans are and gives me the okay to move ahead before I commit anything to script. And while some fans are negatively antsy, I've seen a healthy amount of positive anticipation. I'm not going to please everyone, and boy howdy do I know I'm the least favorite among some fans. But I think in the long run, folks will look back on the whole run and see both what I was out to do and what a fun ride it was taken as a whole." So in other words, he acknowledges at that last part that he knows he's not among the favorites writers of the comic right now. He's the least favorite right now. He's not very popular. He understands that. He understands fans don't like him right now for what he's doing, but he's hoping that in the long run, folks will look back on the whole run and see both what I was out to do and what a fun ride it was taken as a whole. So in other words, he's hoping people, even those that are against him, look back at this and say, you know what? This wasn't as bad as we thought it was. Maybe he did have a point with all this. Now, when he says whole run, that kind of